Hi, gay is not sin, and Jesus isn't asking the gay person to change and be straight. That's right, the Bible doesn't condemn gays. There's some verses that people use to say gay is sin, but they actually don't say gay is sin at all. So it's kind of interesting. I'd kind of like to know how you get the Bible to say gay is sin. Because when I read the Bible, I don't see it because like for instance, Romans chapter 1, verse 26 and 27 describes acts that gay people they don't do this. And you can get an idea of what gay people do by looking at your married life. You straight man married to a straight woman, you straight woman married to a straight man, somehow or another you got married. You know, it was probably you met somebody, you dated them for a while and fell in love and got married, Period of time went by. Some of you get married pretty quick, some of you take years. But nevertheless, you do a little dating thing and then you get married. Now, a lot of you straight people do all kinds of sort of things without any intent to get married. You have as many as women as you want. And that doesn't seem to bother you at all. And then you get married. So you all say, well, this is just perfectly fine. Then you look at gays who are doing the same thing that you did. A lot of gays, they basically are just like straights. They want to meet somebody and settle down and marry them. And also, if you're not married, you pretty much are looking to get married. And so you're out going to the places that you can meet people to date. So when you look at the Bible and read it, and read activities in the Bible, then you want to say, this represents, in this case that I'm talking about, gays, then you got to look at the gay community and see their behavior. Now, if you walk into a bathhouse, you're going to see orgies and other kind of stuff. This is not an example of gay behavior. It is an example of human behavior. Because you could do the exact same thing. You could find the particular bathhouse or something for straight people and the whorehouses and the various other kinds of things and go to all the different orgy rooms and everything. Well, does this mean that straight is sin? No, because far and large, most straights, as they grow up and they reach the age that they want to meet somebody and fall in love and get married. And so this is what straight peoples do. And so this is how you can determine who gay people are when you're reading the Bible. You see their behaviors and then you can read the Bible and you can find out if the Bible is talking about these set of people. And generally speaking, it should be pretty easy to understand that some of these areas that you were reading do not talk about gays. Because when you're reading the Bible, if you imagine what really was going on in Paul's day, keep in mind Romans was written in a certain city. The name of that city was Corinth. And Corinth was a city of about 400,000 people when Paul was there. It was a seaport, and it was well known for its temple the temple prostitutes. And so, and how do we know that? Well, I've got a video that I took and a couple programs I did. Hi, go ahead, I'm shooting the other way. That show where Paul was. Paul kind of rented a place there in Corinth, and he wrote the book of Romans there in Corinth. And if you looked out his window, and there's a hill behind Corinth, one side is the sea and the other side is this hill. It's called Corinth. In other words, the mountain of Corinth. You have Acropolis, which is Acropolis, which is that mountain with all those temples on in Athens. Well, I hiked up that temple, and I did a program from the temple of Aphrodite, said to have 1,000 temple prostitutes. So, it's kind of interesting how you can say that Paul was writing about gays when, in fact, that this city was well known for its prostitution. So when Paul was sitting there looking out his window and walking down the streets of Corinth, he can look and he can see the temple of Aphrodite. Now it's completely ruined, but no doubt that it was lit up, and that mountain there is interesting. It's full of holes, tunnels, and caves and everything. You can't really go in them, but you can see nooks and crannies and doors and stuff that would go down into the mountain where they've dug out for various reasons. And there's there's 3 different kind of walls going around to protect the entrance, and there's a wall going all around the top of that mountain. It's pretty sophisticated setup for worshiping other gods, namely the Aphrodite, the goddess Aphrodite. Now also when Paul walked out his front door, he can look over and he can see the temple of Apollo. The temple of Apollo set up on a mountain, really big temple. I did a program from there, took some pictures. And this is how you come to believe that gay is sin, because Paul wrote the Romans in the town of the Corinthians, Corinth. And he was writing, and the description of what Paul is talking about is he's in a foreign country, but he's talking about the Jews that are there in that foreign country, the Hebrew people. It's supposed to be people of God. They grew up and they were taught the ways of God and so forth, according to the prophets and the 5 books of Moses, and first 5 books we know in the Bible. And but Paul saw that these Hebrew men especially would be joining these temples and engaging in the orgies and the fertility religion of that main religion of that city, representing Aphrodite. And then there was, of course, Paul was also in Athens, where he gave one sermon at the point where there was this unknown God, and I did a program on that same area. It's a big old rock now, but lots of churches were built on that, and even Paul founded a couple of churches there, and he preached there a lot and gone there. And but one time he said, to the pagans there, he said, you even have a temple to the unknown God, and so I'll tell you who this God is. And right behind you could see the goddess of the temple for Athena, and there's several temples in there, one to Zeus and so forth, on the top of Acropolis. And so everywhere that Paul went in this foreign country, Greece, there was the religions involved considerable sexual rituals, and there were plenty of sodomites. And so when Paul is describing he's writing and saying, you Hebrews, you grew up, you were adults now, you grew up in the ways of God, but you turned from those ways and you turned to other gods. And then so God gave you over to what? To go ahead and join these fertility temples in the sexual rituals. And then after that he describes the vile passions involved in those orgies that was going on in the worship of those temples. Now when you're looking at gays, tell me, there's 700 million gays. Should be pretty easy. We see gays on the news. Half the United States now, half the states just about have gay marriage. And so it would be pretty easy to find out about gays these days. And you would find out that they're like you. They grow up, get to that age, they want to meet somebody. They find out where they can meet them. They do all the things that you do as a straight person to meet somebody, to date them, to fall in love, and to get married. And a lot of you straight people, you're not particularly going out on the weekend or whatever any day to the bars and whatever else you go to, or the church or Sunday thing, particularly to meet somebody to get married. You're going out because you want some loving. And if you fall in love, well, that's okay too. But if you don't, you just want some loving. And so you go out and get it and see how many notches you can put in your gun. And so if you're trying to use, as Christians doing these things, because 60%, including Christians, get divorces, and they get divorces more than once often. So you have to be figuring out your own morality, and that you're conducting supposedly, technically at least, immoral behavior, as according to what's in the Bible. And hi, how are you? So you need to try to grasp what it is that you're doing to so that you can know better how to, as you want, to condemn gays. You say you don't condemn, God does, or the Bible does. But the Bible, as I'm saying in Romans chapter 1, verse 18 through 32, it is describing something that does not describe gay behavior. And it seems like it should be easy, like I keep on saying, because you know yourself. You know when you go out and date somebody, you don't even think anything about it being immoral. And then if you fall in love and marry him and all that, and any kind of time you had sex along the way, you don't give it a second thought as it being immoral or not. But if the gay people do exactly what you're doing, getting of that age, wanting to date somebody, falling in love and getting married, even though you might not think marriage is possible, marriage, because you don't allow it, the laws don't allow it at a particular time, now it's changing. That doesn't mean that under God, gays are married or not married. And like I've been with my lover for 24 years. It's only recently that the laws became that we can get married legally, and we got married legally. But we've been together just now, I guess, about 25 years. And so tell me, how does that make vile passions one with another, describing orgies and stuff like that? That's not what me and my lover are doing. And that's not what you're doing when you met your spouse. And me and my spouse, we live just about like you probably would, We have a house, we go to work and so forth, and do things we like to do, just like you do. So when you're reading the Bible and you want to condemn 700 million people, you need to use some scriptures that pretty well describe it. And you say, okay, well, you will just say that we won't be using Romans anymore, but what about 1 Corinthians 6:9? Again, that key word, Corinthian, and the verse uses the word sodomite. There's a lot of modern versions, and you got to be careful with modern versions. They have 50,000 to 80,000 corruptions. You can find this out by studying Westcott and Hort. And a sodomite is a sodomite, period. In this definition, it says sodomite, colon. That means a sodomite does whatever comes after, but it is still a sodomite. So we can go to the Old Testament, find out what a sodomite is to the Hebrew people. And the sodomite is a male temple prostitute. So finally you decide, well, okay, we don't have to use those verses. And since 1 Timothy uses the same word, arsenokotes, you have to then eliminate that verse because it's talking about a male temple prostitute and not gays. So you then say, well, let's go back to the Old Testament. Since we can't use anything in the New Testament because they don't really talk about gay behavior, they talk about fertility worshiping and ritual sex in orgies and stuff like that to other gods. So you said, well, let's go to Leviticus. You know, the old Leviticus, man lies with mankind as man lies with womankind. But, you know, a little studying, I mean, that's it. That verse almost sounds like, how could it not be? He's talking about gay people. Well, because the first word, man, when you translate to English, and it's pretty universal, you don't translate the meaning it meant in the Hebrew language. Just like in the Greek language, you got words like for love. There's several words for love. But in the English language, we have the word love. So we need extra words to tell us what kind of love is talking about. Is loving God, loving possessions, loving the wife, loving kids, you know, loving your dog. So you got to figure out what it is. And so Greek has several words that you could choose from, so you don't have to add all these other kinds of words to tell you what kind of love it is. Well, Hebrew is sort of like that. It's got a number of words also that English has only one word. And when translators translate, they don't bother to add in what that form of, in the case of Greek, love meant. And back in Leviticus, it's likewise. They don't tell you what kind of man it is. However, when you look up the original Hebrew, you find out that that word for man is practicing straight man. And so, hi, how are you? And then it describes how the sentence could be put in there. There's about 13 sentences that could mean that sentence could be correct, sort of correct. 3 of those sentences, it would destroy the sentence and it would be unreadable in Hebrew. And 10 of those sentences for that verse that's translated could be readable and fit the grammar in the Hebrew. And it is basically saying a man that has already slept with a woman and liked it. In other words, a practicing heterosexual male is what that word man means. Then you get to the womankind, and it's talking about a sexually immoral woman. It's talking about probably an adulterous type of woman, which makes sense when you relate it to the Bible, because God considers you committing adultery to when you have relations with other gods. And so you got to realize that having going to other religions, you're actually committing adultery in your relationship with God. And so, yes, God would use an example of an adulterous woman. So if a heterosexual Hebrew man went to a heterosexual adulterous woman, then that is what's being described here. So when it says this practicing heterosexual man, and in this case it's referring to Hebrew men, goes to another man, and that man is ambiguous. However, we get a clue to what it means by the word abomination. Every use of the word abomination in the Old and New Testament is directly related to worshiping other gods. So when it says it's an abomination, that means because what you're doing is an act in worship to other gods. So now we have a good idea who this other man is in the man with man. Hi, how are you? And so there, where we got here? There you go. Have it would be a male temple prostitute, because that's what Hebrews actually did. Hebrew men, many of them, they went to the fertility temples when Moses was leading them to the promised land, the Hebrew men would stop off of fertility temples to get blessings by having ritual sex with male temple prostitutes. This is a fact. This doesn't need very much proven because it's a fact. It's already known. It's cut in stone, and we got the carvings on walls of these temples, and we got literature and so forth of all what these Hebrew men did. So we know that in Moses' day that heterosexual men went to male temple prostitutes. Now we also know that many of these male temple prostitutes, if not most, dressed up like women. This is where some people get the idea that transgenders or transsexuals or transvestites is sin, because the Bible is saying don't dress up like women. But that's not what the Bible is saying here. It's saying something very different. It's talking about these temple prostitutes that are dressing up like women, because that the Hebrew man that's going to them kind of likes women, you know. So if the sodomite cut off ding dong and dressed up like a woman, then it's a little easier for a heterosexual man to have ritual sex with. Now, it's important that they have ritual sex with a man, because that is more sacred in fertility worship than having a prostitute temple relationship with a woman. There were women temple prostitutes, but they weren't as sacred as men temple prostitutes. After all, you know, these heterosexual men want to get as much as they can, and then the rumor is you get blessings if you have these ritual sex things. So when you're studying the Bible, if you want to find out about gay people, you need to find out, where does the Bible talk about gay people? And again, like I told you earlier, it is because of the person getting of age and deciding to want to be with somebody else, and it happened to be the same sex here. For heterosexuals, it's opposite sex, and you want to meet somebody, date them, fall in love, and get married. So then when you read the Bible, if you can find this and you find it condemned, then you will have something to say when you're trying to condemn gay. However, anytime you find anything that looks like modern day gay behavior, in that a person wants to find somebody and get married, we got lots of people around this place, heterosexuals. If you want examples and everything, is the way you should go, instead of trying to look at the immorality in gay communities. Look at the immorality in straight communities. I mean, we got some of the most biggest role models, sports role models and everything, bragging about 2,000 sexual partners. And this is not actually your normal straight relation, is it? And so we find that you can find out if it's talking about gays or not. Jesus said born eunuchs. And he said that it'd be difficult for people to accept what he's teaching here. And so if you fall in the line, so a eunuch is a eunuch is a eunuch, and that means they can't do it in one way or another, then you're in the majority. And this is, Jesus says that most of you can't accept or understand this teaching when he says born eunuchs. But when you do exhaustive research and going through several different language and dialects of the time of Jesus, and reading the literature of those days, and set high criteria on how to try to find out who is a gay person, you'll find out born eunuchs are gays. And Jesus is pretty positive about them. So if you don't know Jesus right now, turn to him. Say, Jesus, I believe you're the Son of God, and that God rose you on the third day. A simple prayer gets you saved. He'll forgive you of your sins. Read the King James Bible. Get to know Jesus. Ask Jesus to baptize you in the Holy Spirit. Got a place of pain? Touch your hand right now. And in the name of Jesus, be healed. See you next week.